The hidden power. Alex sat in the dimly lit room, the glow of his monitor the only light breaking the darkness. The world outside was bustling, with ships flying overhead and the low hum of the city filling the night air. But for Alex, none of it mattered. He had always felt out of place in this world, like something was missing, like something deep inside him was waiting to awaken. Little did he know, tonight would be the night he uncovered the truth. It started with a strange sensation in his fingers. He was typing on his keyboard, working on yet another mundane task, when it happened. A pulse, a ripple, coursed through his hands. At first, he thought it was nothing, perhaps just a trick of the mind. But when he looked down, his fingers were glowing faintly, the soft light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. His breath caught in his throat. "What's happening to me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. Alex quickly pulled his hands away from the keyboard, but the glow didn't disappear. It lingered, like a secret waiting to be discovered. His heart raced as he tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a malfunction, maybe it was something simple, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. Fingers trembling, Alex tried to focus on the screen in front of him. The glow intensified as he concentrated. Then, without warning, it flared. The lights in his room flickered, and the air around him seemed to hum, as if something ancient and powerful was awakening. He could feel it, the energy coursing through him, filling him with a strange kind of power. His skin tingled, his mind swirling with possibilities. He had to understand what was happening. He reached out, trying to control it. But as soon as his hand hovered near the monitor, the screen crackled and flickered. Words he hadn't typed appeared on the screen, forming a message. "You are not alone." His breath caught. The words weren't his, yet they felt like they came from deep within him. They made his heart pound with both fear and excitement. "What does this mean?" he thought. The message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the screen blank again. But the glow in Alex's hands remained, bright and unwavering. Panic rose within him. What was this power? Why did it feel so alive? Suddenly, the door to his apartment creaked open. Alex spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. He hadn't heard anyone come in. No one should be here. Standing in the doorway was a figure he didn't recognize. Tall, cloaked in shadow, and yet there was something familiar about them. Alex's pulse quickened as the figure took a step forward. "You shouldn't have found it," the stranger said, their voice low and unsettling. Alex's mind raced. Found what? Before he could respond, the figure was gone, vanishing as if they had never been there. All that remained was the faint glow in Alex's hands, now fading, but still there, still real. He stood frozen, his mind reeling. What was that? Who was that person? And what was this power he had just unlocked? He glanced around his apartment, the world suddenly feeling much smaller, more confined. Alex had always known there was something special about him, something different. Now he realized just how deep that difference went. He wasn't just any human. He was something else. A knock at the door broke him from his thoughts. He hesitated, his hand still trembling, before walking cautiously over. The moment he opened it, he found no one standing there, only a small folded note on the ground. "They are watching. Don't trust anyone." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His mind raced. Who was watching? And why? Alex knew he couldn't stay here anymore. Not with this power. Not with whoever was out there, lurking in the shadows. He had to find out the truth about what was happening to him, and why it had chosen him. The answers were out there, hidden in the dark corners of the world, and Alex was about to uncover them all. But little did he know, the more he dug, the deeper he would fall into a world of secrets, betrayal, and a terrifying truth about humanity that no one had ever dared to mention. As he left his apartment and stepped out into the cold night air, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. But he also knew one thing for certain. He would never be the same again. A desperate chase. The cold wind bit at Alex's skin as he walked briskly down the darkened street. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally long, every flickering streetlight casting eerie glows along the cracked pavement. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was following him. It wasn't just paranoia. It was a gut feeling, a primal instinct honed by years of feeling out of place, a feeling that something was always just beyond his reach. He quickened his pace, glancing over his shoulder every few steps, but there was nothing there, at least, not that he could see. Yet, the weight of the sensation grew heavier, gnawing at him from the inside out. Alex turned a corner, almost running now, and stopped dead in his tracks. His breath came out in short, sharp bursts. Standing ahead of him in the shadows were three figures. They were cloaked in dark, nondescript clothing, their faces hidden beneath hoods. They didn't speak, didn't move. They just stood there, watching him with an intensity that made his blood run cold. A shiver ran down his spine. They were the ones who had been following him. They knew. Without thinking, Alex spun on his heel and bolted, his heart pounding in his chest. He ran faster than he ever had before, the city's maze of streets and alleys offering little comfort. His mind raced, scrambling for a plan, but there was only one thought that consumed him: get away. He turned another corner and slid to a stop in front of an alleyway, almost losing his balance. Looking back, he saw the figures were still there, only now they were moving toward him. Their steps were deliberate, slow, almost as though they were savoring the chase. The glow in Alex's hands flared to life again, the power inside him reacting to the fear coursing through him. Control it, he told himself, but the fear was too much. The power surged, uncontrollable, a violent pulse of energy that sent a wave of heat crashing through the alley. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and a faint light flickered in the air, distorting reality for a split second. The figures froze in place, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected burst of energy. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Alex turned and ran deeper into the alley, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The power, still surging within him, made him feel like he was floating, as though the world was both too close and too far away. His senses were heightened, everything around him becoming too sharp, too vivid. His footsteps echoed against the walls, the air thick with tension. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the shadows were closing in. Suddenly, he heard it. A low, guttural growl. His skin prickled as he turned, instinctively raising his hands, the power already ready to burst free. But before he could react, one of the figures lunged forward, moving with a speed that defied logic. Alex barely managed to dodge, the figure's hand grazing his shoulder as it passed. A jolt of cold terror shot through him. They were too fast, too strong. Desperation clawed at him. How do I stop this? In that instant, something inside Alex shifted. The power surged once more, but this time it didn't feel like fear. It felt like control. It felt like his will was finally matching the power within him. His hands crackled with energy, and without thinking, Alex extended them in front of him. A shockwave erupted from his palms, sending the figure crashing backward. The others hesitated for a moment, but that was enough time for Alex to break free. He pushed himself harder, faster, not daring to look back this time. As the alley opened up into a wider street, Alex found himself face to face with a dead end. The towering walls of a warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted doors locked tight. His heart hammered in his chest. He couldn't go back the way he came, not with them so close. And yet he had no choice but to face them. The figures appeared once more, emerging from the shadows like specters. The one who had attacked him earlier was now at the front, their eyes glowing faintly beneath the hood. "You can't run forever, Alex," the figure spoke, their voice distorted and unnatural. "You've unlocked something ancient, something dangerous. And now, you belong to us." Alex's breath hitched. What did they mean by that? But before he could react, a sudden noise echoed from the street behind him. A siren blared, the sound of an approaching vehicle growing louder. The figures froze, uncertainty flickering in their movements. Alex seized the moment and dove toward the warehouse door, his body crashing against it with a resounding thud. With panic fueling him, he pushed and pulled on the rusty door handle until it finally gave way, creaking open just enough for him to slip inside. As the door slammed shut behind him, Alex pressed his back against it, gasping for breath. The immediate danger had passed, at least for now. But as he looked around the dimly lit interior of the warehouse, he knew that this was only the beginning. Who were these people chasing him? What was this power that he had unlocked, and why were they so desperate to capture him? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. He was in deeper than he ever could have imagined. And now, there was no turning back. The truth revealed. The heavy door of the warehouse creaked shut behind Alex with a finality that sent a chill through him. His hands still trembled from the encounter, but as the adrenaline slowly ebbed away, a deep, unsettling silence settled in. The dim light from a few scattered overhead bulbs barely illuminated the massive space around him. Large, rusted metal containers lined the walls, and debris littered the concrete floor. It felt like a place forgotten by time, a place where secrets were buried. Alex leaned against one of the containers, trying to catch his breath. The figure who had attacked him, the one with the cold, glowing eyes, had called him by name. How did they know me? A rustling sound broke through the silence, and Alex spun around, his heart racing. He had expected more of the cloaked figures, but instead, a man stepped out from behind one of the containers. He was tall, with sharp features, and an air of authority that made him instantly intimidating. His eyes, unlike the others, were calm, almost too calm. "I didn't think you'd make it this far," the man said, his voice smooth and measured. "But you're more resourceful than they gave you credit for." Alex clenched his fists, still on edge. "Who are you? What do you want with me?" The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to answer your questions, Alex. But first, let me ask you something. Do you ever wonder why you've always felt different? Like there's something inside of you waiting to be unleashed?" Alex's breath caught. His mind raced. How did this man know about his power? How did he know about the feeling that had been gnawing at him for years? "I don't know what you're talking about," Alex said, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. The man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Alex. "You've felt it, haven't you? The power inside you. That surge when you were cornered, when you pushed the boundaries of what you thought was possible." Alex swallowed hard. The events of the past few hours played through his mind. The glowing hands, the shockwave, the way everything had felt so alive. "Who are you?" Alex repeated, his voice growing firmer despite the fear crawling under his skin. The man's expression softened slightly. "My name is Dane. I'm part of a group that has been watching you for quite some time. You see, you're not like other humans. You've awakened something that was buried deep within the human genome for centuries." Alex's head spun. "What do you mean? What's inside me?" Zane's eyes darkened. "A power, one that no one was ever meant to wield. A power that has been hidden from the rest of humanity for millennia. You are the descendant of an ancient race, a forgotten bloodline that was erased from history. The truth is, humans were once far more than what you are today. We possessed abilities that were wiped out in a great war, a war so devastating that it nearly destroyed the world." Alex's mind raced, struggling to grasp the weight of what Zane was saying. "But why me? Why now?" Zane's expression grew more serious. "The war didn't just erase our abilities. It locked them away, buried deep within the human DNA. And now, for reasons we don't fully understand, that dormant power is starting to resurface. It's happening to you because your lineage is the key. Your bloodline holds the final piece to unlocking humanity's forgotten legacy. Alex felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath him. So this power, this thing inside me, it's from some ancient war. Yes, Zane said, but it's more than just power. It's an awakening. Your body, your mind, they're starting to merge with something older, something more primal. The more you tap into it, the stronger it becomes. But with that strength comes a terrible price. The more you use it, the harder it will be to control. Alex's head spun. It felt like everything he thought he knew was slipping away, replaced by this terrifying new reality. The power in his hands, the one that had almost consumed him, was part of something ancient, something that humans weren't supposed to have anymore. And yet, here he was, a living vessel for it. But why are they after me? Alex asked, his voice shaking. Who are they? Zane's gaze hardened. They're the ones who want to control it, the ones who want to use you for their own purposes. They're part of an organization that has been hunting for those with the power ever since it began to resurface. They'll stop at nothing to capture you and study what's inside you. They believe that if they can unlock the full extent of your abilities, they'll become unstoppable. Alex's blood ran cold. He had barely escaped them once, and now it seemed they were more dangerous than he could have imagined. He had no idea who these people were, but one thing was clear. They wouldn't stop until they had him. I don't want any part of this, Alex said, the words coming out in a rush. I don't want this power. I just want to be normal. Zane's expression softened with an almost sad understanding. You can't run from it, Alex. The power is inside you, and it will never let you go. The only choice you have now is to learn how to control it, or risk losing yourself to it completely. Alex's chest tightened. The walls of the warehouse seemed to close in on him. How do I control it? How do I stop it from destroying everything? Zane took a step closer, his voice low and serious. That's what I'm here to help you with. But you're not the only one with this power. There are others who have awakened, just like you. Some will fight to protect it. Others will use it to bring the world to its knees. Alex's mind reeled with the implications of Zane's words. He was no longer just a man running from some strange power. He was caught in something far bigger, something that threatened the very fabric of humanity. The only question was, would he be strong enough to face it? Or would he fall like so many others before him? As Zane stepped back into the shadows, leaving Alex to digest everything he had just learned, Alex knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. A shocking betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and fear. Alex couldn't escape the weight of the revelation Zane had dropped on him. His life had changed, irrevocably. He had tried to continue living, tried to push the truth aside and carry on as if nothing was different, but it was impossible. Every part of him felt altered, as though the very core of who he was had shifted in ways he couldn't understand. Zane had been teaching him, guiding him through the strange powers awakening inside him. The energy, once uncontrollable, was beginning to make sense, but at a cost. Every time Alex used it, every time he pushed himself further, it felt like a piece of his humanity slipped away. Zane insisted it was necessary to unlock the true potential of the power, but Alex wasn't so sure. The power was too overwhelming, too dangerous. One afternoon, Alex sat in a quiet corner of their hideout, his head spinning with questions. He was still trying to piece together the fragments of the history Zane had revealed, the truth of his bloodline, and the forces hunting him. Zane had been distant the past few days, spending more time away, leaving Alex to wonder about his true intentions. Was Zane really on his side, or was there something more to his story? Just as Alex started to shake off the uneasy feeling gnawing at him, the door to the room opened. In stepped Mara, a young woman Alex had met just days before. She had been one of Zane's allies, helping to train him and guide him through his newfound abilities. She had a fierce, almost ethereal quality to her, calm, confident, with a quiet strength that drew Alex in. But today, there was something different about her. "Mara," Alex said, trying to mask the tension in his voice. "How are you?" She smiled faintly but didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed the door behind her and took a slow step toward him. Alex noticed how her movements seemed deliberate, controlled, as if she had something on her mind. "Mara," he repeated, a nervous edge creeping into his tone. "What's going on?" She stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. "Alex," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. "There's something I need to tell you." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Mara's gaze hardened. "I'm not who you think I am." For a moment, Alex didn't understand. He stared at her, confused, but something in her eyes, something dark, told him she wasn't joking. "I don't understand," Alex said, his voice trembling slightly. Mara took another step closer, her face now inches from his. Her eyes bore into him, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of something cold and dangerous lurking behind them. "You've trusted me, Alex," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it was all a lie. Before Alex could react, Mara's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with a strength that took him by surprise. A surge of energy rippled through him, but it wasn't his own. The power surged out of him involuntarily, and in that moment, Alex realized he couldn't control it. A sharp pain shot through his head, and for a brief second, his vision blurred. The world around him seemed to tilt, as if he were being pulled into some dark abyss. He fought it, but it was too late. The power was being siphoned out of him, drained by Mara's touch. He gasped, desperate to break free. "Mara, stop," he shouted, his voice ragged. But she didn't listen. Her face remained expressionless, her eyes cold as ice. "You don't understand, Alex. I've been working for them all along." Alex's world spun, and the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. She's been working for them. The same people who had been hunting him. The same people who had been watching his every move. But why? Alex managed to choke out. "Why would you betray me?" Mara's grip tightened, and the power surged again. "It was never about you, Alex. It was always about the power inside you. You were never supposed to have it. We were sent to control you, to make sure you never reach your full potential." Her words struck him harder than any physical blow. She had been the one person he trusted, the one person who had been by his side. And now she was the one to betray him. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have ever imagined. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open. Zane entered, his expression grim, his eyes flicking between Alex and Mara. "Mara," he said coldly, "what have you done?" Mara's gaze flickered briefly to Zane before she released her grip on Alex. The power inside him dissipated, and the world around him returned to normal. But the damage had been done. Alex's body trembled, not just from the power, but from the sting of betrayal. "I'm sorry, Alex," Zane said, his voice filled with regret. "I didn't want it to come to this." Alex looked at him, his heart heavy with confusion. "What do you mean? Is this some kind of game to you?" Zane shook his head. "No, it's never been a game. But the truth is, I wasn't the only one watching you. Mara's allegiance lies with an organization far more powerful than anything I could control. She was sent to infiltrate us." Mara's face twisted into something close to a sneer. "Don't pretend you didn't know. You knew I'd be a useful pawn. But you were too naive to see it." The words cut deeper than Alex was ready to admit. Zane had known. He had known from the start that Mara's loyalty was not to him. And yet he had allowed her to get close. He had trusted her. Why had Zane kept this secret? Zane's eyes softened. "I was trying to protect you, Alex. I wanted to give you the tools to control the power inside you. I didn't want to lose you to it." Mara's laughter rang out, cold and hollow. "Too late for that. The power is already changing him. It's too strong for anyone to control." Alex felt the weight of those words sink in. He had been betrayed, not once, but twice. And now, the true nature of the war he was caught in was beginning to unfold. As the walls closed in around him, Alex realized that this was just the beginning. He was no longer just a victim of circumstance. He was a player in a game much bigger than he had ever imagined. And the stakes had just been raised. The ultimate test. The betrayal had cut deep, but Alex wasn't the type to give in easily. He had survived, even when the odds were stacked against him, and he wasn't about to let the pain of Mara's deception destroy him. The walls of the warehouse, once a place of temporary safety, now felt like a prison. The shadows seemed to close in around him, and every echo of footsteps was a reminder that the people who wanted him for his power were still out there, waiting, lurking in the background. Zane had been distant since the confrontation with Mara. His cold silence spoke volumes, but Alex knew that he had to move forward. There was no other choice. The power inside him wasn't something he could ignore or control easily. It was a force that was growing stronger by the day, and if he didn't learn to master it, it would consume him. "Alex," Zane finally said one evening, after days of silence, "we need to prepare you. They'll come for you again, and this time, they won't stop until they have you." Alex nodded, his mind already running through 100 scenarios. What would they do to him if they captured him? The answers weren't hard to imagine. He had seen enough of what people would do for power. He couldn't let that happen. Zane's voice broke through his thoughts. "There's a place, a facility where you can train, where you can learn to control the power. We can't stay here. We need to move fast." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A facility. What kind of place was it? And who else would be there? "Where is it?" Alex asked, his voice calm despite the rising anxiety. "A hidden location. I'll take you there. But be ready, Alex. This is the last chance you'll have to learn control before it's too late." The weight of Zane's words sank deep into Alex's chest. His body was already reacting to the power within him, pulsing with energy that was at times both exhilarating and terrifying. The ability to shape reality, to alter the world around him with just a thought. It was intoxicating, but it was also dangerous. If he didn't learn to harness it, he could very well become the thing he feared most. With little time to waste, Alex and Zane packed what they needed, leaving the warehouse behind and traveling in the dead of night. Every street, every corner, felt like an obstacle, as if they were being watched. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the moment they stepped out of the shadows, they would be hunted. The journey was tense, each moment filled with the anticipation of what awaited them. Zane didn't speak much during their trip, but when he did, it was only about the task at hand. After what seemed like an eternity, they arrived at an old, secluded building in the middle of a forest. The facility was hidden in plain sight, designed to blend into the natural surroundings. To the outside world, it looked like nothing more than an abandoned military installation. But Alex could feel the energy in the air, thick, heavy, charged with the same power that raged inside him. "This is it," Zane said, his tone unreadable. "Inside, you'll meet others like you. Some of them will be your allies. Others, not so much." Alex's pulse quickened. "Others like me." He wasn't sure if that was a relief or a warning. Inside the facility, the atmosphere was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and the air hummed with energy. It felt as though the very structure of the place was alive, pulsating with an unseen force. Alex followed Zane down narrow corridors, unsure of what awaited them. Eventually, they reached a large open chamber, and Alex's breath caught in his throat. The room was filled with people, others who, like him, seemed to radiate a strange energy. Some were training, others sparring, while a few stood in quiet meditation, their eyes closed as if they were in tune with something beyond the physical world. "These are the others," Zane said. "Some of them are older than you, more experienced. Others are just starting to unlock their abilities. But all of them share one thing: the power. Alex scanned the room, his mind racing. What was this place? What was their purpose? And why had Zane brought him here? Zane turned to him, his expression serious. "This is where you will learn to control your power. This is your last chance, Alex. If you fail, you will lose yourself to it forever." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Alex didn't know what was worse: the idea of failing or the idea of losing himself to something he couldn't understand. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what was to come, but he knew that he had no choice. The next few weeks were a blur of intense training. Every day felt like a battle, both physical and mental. Alex struggled to keep up with the others, some of whom were already masters of their abilities. But each lesson, each failure, pushed him closer to understanding the power within him. It wasn't just about the strength of his abilities. It was about control. Zane had warned him time and again: control or chaos. It was the only choice. If Alex didn't learn to master his power, it would destroy him and everything he cared about. One evening, after an exhausting training session, Zane pulled Alex aside. His eyes were hard, but there was a flicker of something else there: concern, maybe, or regret. "Alex," he said, his voice low, "I need you to understand something. The power inside you, it's not just a gift. It's a weapon. And there are those out there who want to use you. They'll do anything to manipulate you, to turn you into their weapon." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had already learned that much, but hearing Zane say it aloud made it real in a way that nothing else could. "Your training here is just the beginning," Zane continued. "They'll come for you, Alex. And when they do, you need to be ready. But be careful. There are others here who aren't who they seem. Not everyone wants to see you succeed." Alex felt the weight of Zane's words settle over him. The facility was supposed to be a place of safety, a place where he could learn to control his powers. But now it felt more like a ticking time bomb with unknown forces lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. As the days passed, Alex pushed himself harder, but the shadows grew longer, and the stakes grew higher. The power inside him was still a force he barely understood, and every test, every challenge, felt like a reminder of just how much was riding on his success or failure. He was about to face a test unlike any other, and if he didn't succeed, he knew there would be no coming back. Rising darkness. The days inside the facility passed in a haze of grueling training, but the true test was always lurking in the background. The power inside Alex had been growing, not just in strength, but in awareness. He could feel it, pulsing beneath his skin, ready to break free at the slightest provocation. Each time he trained, the energy within him pushed at his limits, a dangerous reminder of how little control he had. He had come to the realization that this was no longer just about training his body. It was a war for his very soul. The facility, once a place of refuge, had begun to feel more like a cage. The walls closed in as whispers began to circulate among the others. Some of them spoke of dark forces outside, powerful organizations who would stop at nothing to take control of the very abilities Alex and the others were learning to wield. But it wasn't just the outside world that Alex feared, it was the darkness within himself. Zane had warned him time and again. The more you tap into the power, the harder it will be to keep your humanity. Alex didn't understand it fully, not until now. The power was no longer just a tool, it was becoming a part of him, seeping into his thoughts, clouding his judgment, whispering temptations of what he could do with it. It was as if the very essence of the power wanted to consume him, twist him into something else entirely. One evening, after another draining training session, Alex found himself alone in the quiet courtyard of the facility, staring up at the darkening sky. The stars flickered overhead, but they felt distant, cold, like everything else. He couldn't help but wonder how much longer he could hold on to his sanity. The power had begun to affect him in ways he couldn't explain. When he closed his eyes, he sometimes saw flashes of things he hadn't experienced, visions of destruction, of entire cities being wiped from existence with a single thought. And worse, he felt a deep, growing desire to control it, to let go of the restraints and see just how far he could push. Was that me? The thought terrified him. Alex. The voice startled him, breaking his reverie. He turned to see Zane standing in the doorway, his eyes unreadable. "Where have you been?" Alex asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I've been watching," Zane said quietly, stepping forward. "And so has the organization." Alex's stomach churned. He knew what that meant. The organization, the ones who had been hunting him from the beginning, were closing in. They had sensed the power inside him, and now they would stop at nothing to capture him and use him for their own purposes. He had no doubt that they knew exactly where he was. "You're being hunted," Zane continued, his voice low and serious. "And the others, they don't know the full extent of what's at stake here. I brought you here to teach you control, but there's more to this than just training. You've started something that no one can undo. You need to be ready." Alex's heart hammered in his chest. The weight of Zane's words settled over him like a suffocating blanket. "I need to be ready." Ready for what? "You've been changing, Alex," Zane said, his gaze sharp. "The power, it's pushing you to your limits, but it's also testing you. If you don't keep your focus, if you let the darkness consume you, you'll lose yourself." Alex shook his head. "I don't know if I can control it anymore. It's too strong, Zane. Every day, it gets harder. I can feel it pulling me in." Zane took a step closer, his voice softening. "That's the test. The darkness is always there, waiting for you to lose your grip. But if you give in, you'll become like them, the very thing you're trying to avoid." For a moment, Alex could feel the power stirring inside him, waking up in response to Zane's words. It was almost like it could hear him, responding to the challenge. His hands trembled as the energy swirled beneath his skin. He could feel it, the temptation to just let go, to embrace the power and see what it could do. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Zane's gaze never left him. "You need to understand, Alex. The more you give in, the harder it will be to come back. Once the darkness takes hold, it doesn't let go. You've already seen glimpses of what you can do, but those powers, they come with a cost. And that cost will be your soul." The words hit Alex harder than any blow. My soul. He had always known that the power was dangerous, but he hadn't understood just how far it could go. He could feel the pull, the lure of the darkness, and it was stronger than anything he had ever felt before. Suddenly, the sound of a distant siren cut through the air, followed by a deep rumble, an explosion in the distance. Alex's heart stopped. The ground beneath him seemed to shake, the very air vibrating with energy. "They're here," Zane whispered, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time. They've found us." Panic flooded Alex's chest. He had trained for this moment. But now that it was here, he wasn't sure if he was ready. Could he really face these people? Could he control the power, or would it consume him in the process? "They're coming for you, Alex," Zane continued. "And when they do, they'll try to break you. They'll push you to the edge and see how far they can take you before you fall. You need to decide now. Are you going to control this power, or let it control you?" Alex stood there, feeling the tension crackle in the air. The weight of Zane's words hung heavy on his shoulders. The time for training was over. The time for choices was now. With a deep breath, Alex closed his eyes, reaching within himself. He could feel the power there, surging, pulsing, alive. The darkness whispered, promising power beyond anything he had ever known. It was almost too tempting. But in that moment, something inside him clicked. He couldn't let the darkness win. Not now. Not ever. "I'm ready," Alex said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Zane nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Then let's show them who you really are." The ground trembled again as the enemy drew closer. It was time for Alex to face the rising darkness head-on. and he would either rise with it or be swallowed whole. Rising darkness. The days at the facility had begun to blur together, each one a relentless grind toward mastering the power inside him. Alex's body ached from the constant training. His mind struggled to keep up with the overwhelming flood of information, and still, the dark presence inside him continued to grow. The power that had once felt like a gift was beginning to feel more like a curse, an insidious force clawing at his very soul. The more he trained, the stronger it became, until it seemed as though it was no longer something he could control. It wasn't just the training that wore on him. There was something else, a sense of impending doom, a feeling that the walls of the facility were closing in. The energy in the air had shifted. Something was coming. Alex could feel it. And it wasn't just the looming threat of the organization that had been hunting him. No, this was something deeper, darker, an ancient force that had been waiting for him to awaken it. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Alex found himself alone in the meditation room, trying to calm his mind. He sat cross-legged on the floor, breathing deeply, focusing on the energy inside him, attempting to center himself. But it was harder than ever. The power pulsed within him, a dark, thrumming sensation that seemed to echo in his very bones. It was getting stronger, harder to ignore. The door to the room creaked open, and Alex's eyes snapped open. Zane stepped inside, his face grim. There was something different about him tonight, something off. His usual calm, controlled demeanor was replaced with an unsettling tension, as if he was carrying a heavy burden. "Alex," Zane said, his voice low, "we need to talk." Alex stood, his heart pounding. "What's going on? You're scaring me." Zane hesitated, his eyes flickering to the shadows, as if checking for something, or someone, before he spoke. "It's happening faster than we thought. The power inside you, it's not just waking up. It's merging with you, and that means something far more dangerous than we could have ever predicted." Alex swallowed hard. He had suspected it, but hearing it from Zane made the reality hit like a freight train. "What do you mean, merging? What's happening to me?" "The power inside you isn't just an ability. It's an ancient force, a weapon, a catalyst that could destroy everything in its path," Zane said, his voice filled with quiet urgency. "And you're the key to unlocking it, or to stopping it." Alex's mind raced. But why me? Why is this happening now? Zane looked away, as though searching for the right words. "Because you were chosen, Alex. Your bloodline is the key, the same bloodline that survived the ancient war, the one that sealed this power away. The war didn't just erase the power, it locked it inside the humans who had it. And now, it's awakening, but not just inside you." Alex's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "The power is spreading, Alex," Zane said, his voice strained. "There are others, people who have already unlocked parts of it. And some of them want to use it for their own gain. They're planning something catastrophic." Alex shook his head. "So you're telling me that I'm not the only one with this power? And that there are people out there who want to use it, to what? Destroy everything?" Zane's eyes darkened. "Yes, they'd been hunting those with the power for years. And now, they know about you. They know what you're capable of. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure you're either with them, or you're gone." Alex's heart raced. His training, his struggles, it was all leading up to this moment. He wasn't just running from his enemies anymore. He was at the center of something much bigger, something far darker than he had ever imagined. The power inside him wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon, and he had no idea how to control it. He didn't even know if he could. Before he could respond, the building shook, the lights flickering as if something had hit it. A loud, metallic clang echoed through the halls, followed by a series of rapid footsteps. Zane's eyes widened, and Alex could see the panic that flashed across his face. "They found us," Zane whispered. Alex's pulse raced. What do? We fight, Zane said, pulling Alex toward the door. Get ready, Alex. This is your test. If you can't control the power now, there's no hope. With a burst of adrenaline, they sprinted through the hallways, the sound of heavy boots echoing behind them. The facility had always been a place of safety, a refuge where Alex could train in peace. But now it was a war zone. The walls were closing in, and the energy in the air felt like it was about to crack wide open. As they reached the main chamber, Alex saw them, figures cloaked in darkness, their movements quick and precise. They were the ones who had been hunting him, the ones Zane had warned him about. They were here, and they weren't going to stop until they had him. The leader of the group, a tall figure with glowing eyes, stepped forward. Alex, the figure said, their voice cold and metallic, "You're coming with us." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know how to fight these people, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let them take him. Not now. Not after everything he had learned. The power inside him flared to life again, surging through his body like wildfire. This time, he didn't fight it. He didn't try to control it. He let it flow freely, like a raging storm, and in that moment, everything changed. Then the leader of the group slowly rose from the rubble, a sinister smile creeping across their face. "You think you've won?" The leader sneered. "You've only just begun to realize what you're truly capable of. And soon, Alex, you'll see that there's no turning back." But Alex didn't hear them. He was too lost in the power that raged within him, the darkness that was rising up, consuming everything in its path. He was no longer just a victim. He was a force that could reshape reality itself. But as the dust settled and the facilities stood in ruins around him, Alex realized that the true test had only just begun. He had used the power to fight, but what would it cost him? What would he become? The darkness was rising, and so was Alex. "You said." The world around him seemed to freeze. His vision sharpened, the air thick with energy. With a snap of his fingers, the ground beneath the intruder's feet cracked open, sending them tumbling into a deep fissure that had appeared out of nowhere. The power surged again, this time in a concentrated blast, sending a shockwave through the facility, shaking it to its very core. For a moment, there was silence. The final confrontation. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The air was thick with dust, the tremors from Alex's unleashed power still rippling through the crumbling walls of the facility. The enemies had been defeated, for now, but the victory felt hollow. Alex's breath came in ragged gasps as he stood amidst the wreckage, his heart pounding in his chest. The power inside him still throbbed, an insistent, pulsing force that he no longer knew how to control. Zane stood by his side, his eyes scanning the ruined facility, his expression grim. "That was too close," he muttered under his breath, though his voice carried a note of pride. "You're stronger than I thought, Alex, but this isn't over." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, it's not over? I've used everything I've got." Zane's gaze flickered to the broken remnants of the building, the smoldering remains of their attackers. "The ones who came after you are just the beginning. They're not the only group after your power. There are others, far more dangerous ones, who've been pulling the strings from the shadows. And now they know what you're capable of." A chill ran through Alex's spine. He had already fought against powerful enemies, had seen the destruction his power could unleash. But the idea that there were more powerful forces in the world, forces that had been watching him, made him question everything. "You're telling me that there are more of them?" Alex asked, his voice low, filled with both disbelief and anger. Zane nodded solemnly. "Yes, and they'll come for you. They'll use everything at their disposal to break you, to make you their weapon. The power inside you isn't just a force. It's the key to something far bigger than any of us realize, and it's only a matter of time before the others come for it." Alex clenched his fists. He had thought that the worst was over, that the confrontation with Mara's betrayal and the attack on the facility was the final test. But it wasn't. The real battle, his real battle, was just beginning. In the distance, the faint sound of sirens could be heard, a signal that the authorities were coming to investigate the destruction. Alex knew they wouldn't last long here. It was time to move, but there was something else that gnawed at him, something far deeper. He turned to Zane, determination hardening his expression. What do I need to do to stop this? To stop them from using me? Zane looked at him, the weight of the situation settling in. You need to confront them, Alex. You need to face the leaders of the other factions, the ones who think they control the power. You need to make them see that you won't be their pawn. Alex's eyes burned with resolve. And how do I do that? Zane's lips twisted into a grim smile. You're going to have to fight. But this time, you're not just fighting for survival. You're fighting to change the future, to take control of your destiny. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Alex was no longer running from his enemies. He was ready to face them, to take the fight to them, and to prove that no one, not even the most powerful of forces, could control them. He had already unlocked the potential within him, and now he would learn to wield it not as a weapon, but as a force of his own making. Hours later, Zane led Alex to a hidden location, a remote area far from the wreckage of the facility. It was there that Alex would meet the leaders of the factions who sought to control the power he possessed. They were powerful, enigmatic figures with agendas that stretched far beyond anything Alex could imagine. But the more he learned about them, the more he realized that the true battle was not just about the power within him. It was about the choice he would make. Would he use the power to reshape the world as they saw fit? Or would he stand against them, risking everything to protect the freedom of humanity? As he entered the secluded area, he saw them. The leaders, cloaked in shadow, their faces concealed. But their presence was undeniable. They exuded power, control, and ambition, and they were waiting for him. You've come far, Alex, one of them said, their voice echoing through the tense silence. But you are still a child of the old world, bound by its limits. The power within you is not something you can control. It is something you must surrender to. Alex's heart pounded. The moment had come. The time to decide had arrived. He could feel the power within him, thrumming with life, ready to explode. But he wouldn't be controlled. Not anymore. I refuse to surrender, Alex said, his voice firm and unwavering. This power is mine, and I will use it to protect what's mine, to protect the world from people like you. A murmur passed through the leaders, and for a moment, Alex thought they might strike. But instead, the figure at the front stepped forward. You are more powerful than you realize, Alex, the leader said. But power without purpose is nothing more than chaos. You cannot win this fight. You will never be strong enough to stand against us. Alex stood tall, his eyes locked on the leader. He could feel the power rising within him. But this time, it wasn't out of fear. It wasn't chaotic. It was focused, controlled, and he knew it was his to wield. We'll see about that, Alex said, his voice calm and confident. And with that, he unleashed everything he had. Every ounce of energy, every drop of power. The world seemed to tremble as his ability surged forward, a wave of energy that shook the very foundations of the area. The leaders tried to respond, to fight back, but it was too late. Alex had found his true strength. He was no longer just a pawn. He was the force that would change everything. As the battle raged on, Alex realized the truth. This was his destiny. The power within him was not a curse. It was a choice, and he would decide how it would shape the world. The final confrontation wasn't just a battle for control. It was a fight for freedom, and Alex was ready to win.